Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way.
Harvey Sluggo. Okay, Siri just talked to me. Hey, everybody. This is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman, back for the 84th Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We discuss issues of profound importance to democracy and to the survival of the human race. We are engineered by Mike Hirsch from PDA and Steve Caruso from Central Ohio and the Columbus Free Press. We're joined today by, we're starting with 74 people. Glad to have the great Bob Fitrakis with us, among many, many others. We are going to have a really packed gathering today because we're going to focus on gerrymandering. It's really, really hitting the fan now with the manipulation of the voting districts, even to the point now where, at least in Ohio and North Carolina, and we're joined by Robert Wilson, the former Assistant Secretary of State of North Carolina, where technically at this point in time, they can't have elections because we don't have districts. And we'll get to that. We're also going to talk in the second hour. We have the great Julie Levine with us from Topanga, California, and we're going to be talking about 5G. And we're going to begin with my old buddy, Jim Garrison, to introduce us to a great new institution that we're going to network with on our election protection work. So, but in the meantime, once Jim has introduced himself and his university, we're going to get deep, deep, deep into the problems of gerrymandering. It is a brutal morass. It threatens our democracy right to the very core. And so without further ado, I do want to mention we have TATANKA BRICCA on, Anna Georgie, Lynn Fireman, the usual magnificent lineup of truly great activists that are making and have made a difference. And we're really looking for these calls to protect our democracy. I do want to mention one thing up front. If you have any critiques that you want to make, any suggestions or accolades that you want to say about these calls, your suggestions are more than appreciated. You can write me directly at solartopia@me.com, solartopia@me.com, or at gmail.com, either one. I'm happy to hear from you. I'd love to have your feedback on how we can make these calls better. This is the 84th. We have 78 people on the line, and they are always of substance and power, these gatherings. We will be joined at one point by Dennis Bernstein, the great radio host from KPFA in Berkeley. He is nationally syndicated. He's a great supporter of the show. So we will take questions as we move along. I do want to quickly mention one thing. I've been watching the news, as everybody has, about Ukraine, and I have yet to see a significant mention on the major media of the most important situation that we're facing in Ukraine, which is that there are 15 atomic power reactors in Ukraine. And we've already had one blown up at Chernobyl in 1986. But God forbid there should be a war in Ukraine. It would be bad enough just for the war, but we would be almost guaranteed that one or more of those nuclear plants would cause a major catastrophe. And I was in Kiev in 1996 for a conference on the 10th anniversary of Chernobyl, and God help us, we do not want that again. So I wish that people would start paying attention to the presence of these 15 reactors. I am absolutely terrified of the idea of any kind of warfare going on in Ukraine now, not only because the last thing we need is another war, but those reactors, they are old, they are decrepit, they are badly maintained, they have an aging workforce, as we do here. People are retiring left and right, and the reactors. The idea of 15 reactors, all of which are probably over 30 years old, absolutely terrifying. And anybody who gets engaged in a dialogue about the potential for war in Ukraine, please pay attention to that. God help us. Okay, I want to be joined now by JIM GARRISON. Jim is an old buddy. We haven't seen each other for 30 years when, as Jim remembered, we were on acid. and now here we are again. So JIM GARRISON, you are the founder. I'm bringing you in because you have a great network to share. You're also a great activist. You worked with Gorbachev, as I recall, and many other really top-level people in the world of peace and politics. Give us, please, a rundown real quick on your institution and your weekly calls.
Thank you so much, Harvey. It's so good to be back in touch with you after all these years.
Right.
Knowing that we both and all of you on this call are just on the front lines of social change. I know we have very little time, so I'll just introduce what we're doing in the following way, and then want to introduce a couple of people who've joined the call at my request who are actually spearheading the program on democracy. I'm the president of Ubiquity University, which is a global university and learning community. We have been very active in the innovation of education. During the pandemic back in 2020, we decided to do something that seemed very simple but very necessary. We started a 2-hour free Zoom broadcast in May of 2020 so that people all over the world could come together and share their experiences of what it was like going through the pandemic. And we just opened it up without very much expectation. And the next thing we knew, we had tens of thousands of people in over 130 countries worldwide joining our daily broadcasts. For the first 6 months, we broadcast 7 days a week. We now broadcast 5 days a week. And we had over 400 organizations come together to co-sponsor our broadcasts. And so as the months have unfolded, obviously, we have taken note of different issues that have arisen, whether it's the murder of George Floyd, or more recently, the January 6th insurrection. And so we develop programming that goes out to hundreds of thousands of people every day through scores of live streaming partners that have partnered with us on issues of note. And a major issue that we have been dealing with, obviously, is climate change. We're in code red, but we also believe we're in code red with regards to democracy globally with the rise of authoritarianism, but very specifically in the United States. And we have taken the position that this upcoming election in November is absolutely a critical election, which if we lose and the right wing consolidates power in the Senate and in the House, that could well be a mortal blow to democracy in America for all the reasons that we know. So when Harvey and I reestablished contact last week, I said we would love to partner with you folks and begin to bring into Humanity Rising whatever it is that all of us need to know as we prepare for the November election. The two people very, very quickly that I would like to introduce. One is SHELLY ALCORN, who's on the executive leadership team of Ubiquity and Humanity Rising. And she's the one over the last 18 months who's been doing regular briefings for our Humanity Rising audience on democracy and the 2020 election, and then obviously the January 6th insurrection, et cetera. And then also George CAPPANNELLI, who came together with SHELLY and has really been the one who's brought the passion around the protection of democracy. So I want to just introduce you to both of them. And George, maybe you could just say just a minute or two about the program, and if we have more time, Shelley, just so we can get to know everyone. But just know that we stand ready at Humanity Rising with all of our broadcast capacity to disseminate information and ways we can empower activists, not only in the United States, but worldwide, on the very crucial issue of protecting democracy as we know it.
And Jim, you'll put the links to your to Human and your.
Yeah, I'll do that right now while George and Shelley take a minute or two just to share what it is we're trying to do with the program, because we'll have a series of programs between now and November.
Okay, I see George. Go ahead, George Campanelli.
Thanks, Harry. I've heard wonderful things about you. We have a lot of friends in common, but we'll catch up on that at another time. For the moment, beginning March 7th through 11th, and then, as Jim said, for a series of weeks between March and November, we're going to look at democracy, the need to save it, and how, from a variety of different perspectives. Authors, experts, activists, journalists. We want to really dig deep. And most of all, what we want to do is do our best to help wake up the American population and remind them that they have a very critical and essential role in saving democracy. And we look forward to having you and other members of your weekly podcast as part of this series. So I'm going to let Shelley weigh in, but that in a nutshell. And through you and through Jim, we'll talk about it. We do panels that are really incredible dialogues, featured interviews, and a variety of ways that we will cover the topic with these individuals.
Wonderful. Thank you. Really, really glad to be tied up with you. And where is your Shelley? You have Shelley on, and then we're going to move into gerrymandering. But I highly recommend that. Jim is top flight, and as I say, worked with Gorbachev and among others. And do you have Shelley with us?
Yeah, I'm here, and hello. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much for having us. As we have discussed, the prevailing attitude, it seems to me, on the part of the American public is it can't happen here.
Oh.
And that's a complete and utter fallacy. Not only can it happen here, it is happening here. And whatever we can do to collectively understand the why and the how and what we can do, the better. So I've been an avid politics watcher my entire life and studied many fascist and totalitarian political movements and see all of the signs in the United States now that I had hoped I would never see. So that's what we're here to do, to meet people, to help, to offer our broadcast, and to collaborate on these critical issues that are, to be frank, running out of time to solve.
Well,
so thank
Shelley,
you very much.
Thank you so much, Shelley, Jim, and George. We will join you on your podcasts and your gatherings, and we'll. This is a good synergy, and Jim, it's good to see you again. And
Very good to see you.
We'll keep doing this back and forth. So thank you very much. We've just vastly added to our network. Jim, you're right next to TATANKA BRICCA here on my screen. TATANKA is in Santa Cruz, not far from you, and you guys should connect.
Let's meet up.
And with the Romero Institute and all the great work that they do. So both you guys are the real deal, along with Shelley and George, and please do make the connection. All right.
I know Jim from quite a while ago, and he knows Danny very well, and it's really good to see you, Jim.
That always happens. You know,
Yeah.
I make these great introductions, you know, and people have known they're cousins and they've known each other all their lives. So, all right, great. Well, thank you very much, Jim. It's an honor, you and George and Sherry, to be with us, and we'll move ahead, okay? We have 87 people on the call. As Mike mentioned, we can't use four-letter words, but we can speak every way else, including in Yiddish. So I want to go now to Nevada, and then we'll go to North Carolina and Ohio. Start with Judith Whitmer. Then we'll go to Mr. Wilson, and then to in North Carolina, Robert, and then in Ohio. Judith, can you tell us this horrendous wave of assault on our electoral process? If you can start with Nevada, that would be great, please. You are please tell us what your title is.
Hi, I'm Judith. I'm Judith Whitmer. I'm the chair of the Nevada State Democratic Party. We were alerted recently that a Republican Washoe County commissioner had placed an item on the agenda that would call for elections to be militarized at polling locations, called for the National Guard to be at every polling location, called for eliminating nonpartisan oversight of ballot collection and result counting. It called for eliminating electronic voting booths. In other words, it's absolute voter suppression tactics, the kind of tactics that we're used to seeing in a lot of red states, but we're not used to seeing here in Nevada. In Nevada, our legislators have done a really good job of making it easy for Nevadans to vote with an extended early voting period. Now everyone can get a mail-in ballot. We've made everything more accessible. We have automatic voter registration. So now we're seeing these attacks coming forth. And, you know, that's why it's so important for all of us to be vigilant all the time. Even though our Democratic County Commissioner objected to placing this item on the agenda, the DA's office interfered and actually ruled that they had to move forward with the item on the agenda. Now, there's been a huge outcry, obviously, from the public. Obviously, the Democratic Party and Washoe County and the state party and other surrounding counties have pushed back. And we just got word just as this call was starting that the agenda item is supposed to be pulled from the agenda. We're waiting for official notice now, but you know, there's been a huge public outcry against it. But I expect that it will come back again.
God, that's mind-boggling. I mean, my understanding is that the Nevada legislature, both houses are Democrat. Is that right?
Yeah, we have a Democratic majority in our state legislature. That's correct. And
But
a Democrat
you have a Republican Secretary of State. Is that correct?
and a Republican Secretary of State who still certified our election results, and of course got a lot of grief from the Republican Party for it. You know, Nevada's one of the reasons Nevada is being attacked is because our margins are still narrow. I mean, we're still technically a swing state or battleground state. Even though Biden won here, it was only by a 2-point margin. But when you look at the statistics, look at the data, I mean, the margins between Democrat and Republican voter turnout, even with mail-in ballots, the percentages for early voting, it's narrow. So it makes sense that, you know, you would target some of those swing states as well as, you know, red states to take every advantage wherever you could to suppress the vote.
Jeez, it's mind-boggling. My understanding is also, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the Nevada legislature is the first legislature in U.S. history to go majority female. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. We're very proud of that.
Well, as they say in Italian, mazel tov. So good work on that. Let's go. Can you stick with us, Judith? I want to go to a couple more states so we can network. Right above you on my screen is Robert Wilson, former Assistant Secretary of State in North Carolina. Robert, can you give us the bad news from North Carolina? You're muted. Muted. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. As as usual, it is indeed an honor and a privilege to be here with you to discuss gerrymandering. And we here in North Carolina are in the process of drawing the districts for our congressional folks in the House and the Senate members in the legislature. And we did that before, and they went to the North Carolina Supreme Court, and they threw them out saying they were unconstitutional. So they had to do a rewrite, and now we're back in court. And my prediction is I do believe that they're gonna, again, throw out the congressional piece and probably the Senate piece. I don't know how the House piece is going to go, but I do think that they would throw out those two pieces. Now, I think it would behoove everyone to understand when we start talking about gerrymandering, exactly what this is. And gerrymandering is when one party gets to draw the lines for their benefit so that they can maintain power and control. It's not a Republican thing or a Democratic thing or an independent thing. They all do the same thing. And it's done to maintain power and control. And we have gotten to a point now where elected officials get to pick their voters rather than voters get to pick their own elected officials. And I've contended for the last 10, 15 years that that was wrong. But understand that gerrymandering has a history, and it goes back to the early part of the 1870s, right after the Emancipation Proclamation. And when they started drawing districts then, they were gerrymandering then. And they have been doing gerrymandering for the last 120 plus years. But the problem that we now are confronted with is, and I'm getting ready to date myself a little bit here. When I grew up as a kid, I basically grew up in a society that was 80% white, 19% black, and about 1% others. That was in the state of North Carolina. As those numbers begin to change, we started, and it actually started in 1990, when a young man became chair of the National Democratic Party by the name of Ron Brown. That was when we first started talking about the browning of America. And that conversation started in 1991. And when Bill Clinton became president, it magnified it. Because if you remember correctly, a lot of you, that Bill Clinton used to be called the first Black president. And the reason for that was Ron Brown, who was chair of the DNC, and Vernon Jordan were giving access and had a seat at the table. And there was a push then to have minorities involved in government at a bigger volume. And a lot of people got hung up on that. And we have been involved in that fight as the numbers continue to go down in terms of population, and we become more of a diverse nation. It gets worse and worse. I contend to you now that we are at a serious inflection point where if we don't change something, namely our way of thinking about an election, because election is in fact about two things. It is about power and privilege. And everybody that thinks that this is about good government and about us being able to live together is, in my opinion, kind of living in a fantasy land. We need to understand that beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this is not about us individually. This is about us collectively. Can we live together as one people? And I believe that we can. Yeah. And I think there are several things that we need to do, that we need to get involved in terms of what we need to do to make sure that we can maintain our democracy. And when people start talking about states' rights, we got a problem. When
Okay.
people start talking about seceding from the United States, their state seceding, we got a problem. When people start talking about taking over government by force, we got a problem. And the worst part about that is when people start warring citizens against the government, we definitely have a problem. So we have got to come together and understand that this is all about us collectively, not individually. And gerrymandering has been a part of this process for 120 something years.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Very, very well spoken. Very beautiful. Let's go to Ohio now. Steve Caruso, we have some folks on from Ohio to talk about the situation there.
They haven't shown up yet. I've got a couple web pages open on a lawsuit, if I could put those up.
Yeah, please. Well, let me explain real quick. I think we mentioned it last week. The citizens of Ohio voted to reform the gerrymandering situation, and which was out of control. Ohio is about it's about 50-50 Democrat Republican. It started to turn a little more towards the Republican side. They had 16, I believe, congressional seats, and the state was so badly gerrymandered, still is, that the congressional breakdown was 12-4 Republicans to Democrats in a state essentially 50-50. And the even worse, well, just as bad, in both houses of the Ohio legislature, you had Republican supermajorities, even though the state is divided 50-50. So the people of Ohio voted in a process to ameliorate this, and it called for various commissions and so on. And the Republicans sabotaged, and this is just reporting, it's not partisan. The Republicans sabotaged the process and delivered a map that's even worse than 12-4. It's looking more like 14-2 in the congressional, and still with both houses of the legislature supermajority Republican. The legislature in Ohio was so right-wing, has been so right-wing, that they were overruling the Republican governor, John Kasich. And now they sometimes fight with the new Republican governor, Mike DeWine. So the map that was drawn in sabotaging the gerrymandering commission was so bad that it went to the Ohio Supreme Court, which is 4-3 Republican. And the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court, who's a Republican, Maureen O'Connor, threw out the map and the Republicans went completely crazy, but she threw out the map, demanded they redraw it. They drew up another version. They sent it back to the Supreme Court, and she threw it out again. Now, at this point, it's my understanding, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, that Ohio does not have districts in place to conduct the upcoming primaries. And
right.
This is anarchy. There is no, they can, if they tried to hold the election in Ohio, and I believe this is a similar situation in North Carolina, correct me, Robert, if I'm wrong, but there's no way to hold an election now in Ohio because the Republicans sabotaged the reform of the gerrymandering, and then one Supreme Court justice stood up. Is that accurate, Steve? You're actually in Ohio.
Right. Yeah, they're talking about extending the deadline for the election now because Republicans were offered a deal. The Rodin Plan 3, I put the link in the chat for it, and they turned it down. They didn't even look. They showed up late at the meeting. Well, this is what they've been doing all along. They've been kind of like stonewalling the whole process.
Total subversion. So we're joined by Jennifer Roberts, Jennifer Roberts is many of you know, Jennifer Roberts is the former two-term mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, and she is now with the Carter Center dealing with these issues. So my understanding, Jennifer, maybe you know, maybe Steve knows, is that the citizens groups in Ohio responding to the complete meltdown of the gerrymandering process or the districting process in Ohio, some group has drawn up an independent, nonpartisan districting formula. Have you seen this? And Jennifer, are you familiar with other situations around the country like this?
Hi, Harvey. I have pulled over. I am not driving, in case you're worried.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, there are other groups that are trying to get citizen groups to offer their maps. I've heard, and there's so many states that are in the flux right now. I mean, we got Alabama, Ohio, North Carolina. We have special masters who are going to be overseeing what the courts have brought back in North Carolina. One Democrat, one Republican, and one unaffiliated, all former judges. It's what I hear from folks. It's harder than you think to draw what we think of as fair maps, because you are also looking at not double bunking or drawing people out of their districts that they're already in, because that can be seen as putting your thumb on the scale as well. So, but I'm not familiar with exactly up to date what's going on with Ohio. More up to date with North Carolina.
Well, does the Carter Center have a plan on a national basis to counteract gerrymandering? We had discussed last time maybe getting a network of citizen groups to draw up fair maps, to at least have an alternative that we can point to. Is that at all practical?
I have raised the issue, and as I said, every state is different in terms of how they handle elections and how whether the judges are elected or appointed. Even some citizen groups and nonpartisan groups that have suggested maps, the legislature ends up voting against them, and they're the ultimate authority. So every state is different. The Carter Center, is definitely interested in fairness, and that's gerrymandering is all about not being fair. They don't have capacity right now, but they are looking to align with groups and share information with groups that are trying to get better processes. It can work. Some states it's worked very well to have nonpartisan commissions. And you just have to, other states have the ability to overrule it, either the governor or the General Assembly or the courts.
Jennifer, doesn't the Constitution state that Congress has the right to regulate elections across the board, except for when the senatorial elections are held? And now that's this whole thing about legislators being able to run the elections is a ruse. It doesn't have any room in the Constitution. So on a national basis, I think the Republicans would be interested in cooperating, unlike in Ohio, where they don't want to give up their seats anymore, because some Democratic states, are gerrymandered to their benefit. So I think everybody should be on a fair playing field. The people will make the decision. We are a government for the people and by the people. So, why can't we just do that?
I totally agree. I think every seat should be competitive, because that means that elected officials are actually accountable to the people. When they know that they have to work hard and listen hard, they will make better policy. And that's the problem with gerrymandering. We had that horrible HB2 law in North Carolina, 4 or 5 years ago. They looked at who voted for it. 95% of the people who voted for it either had no competition because they were so gerrymandered nobody would run against them, or they won by double digits. So why do they have to be accountable? this is, this is a challenge with a lot of good legislation that the people support, but our lawmakers don't, because they don't have to listen to the people because of gerrymandering.
That's the whole thing in Ohio. They don't want to give up their seats. It's come to that point where either they make a decision to give up their seats or they break the law. So, they're looking at contempt of court issues with this. And Judith Whitmer, earlier, I wanted to ask you, did you have a problem with the Democratic National Party and your slated candidates in Nevada? Has that been resolved, or is that still ongoing?
That's still on. And, we've had our own gerrymandering issues as well here in Nevada. I mean, we have a Democratic state legislative majority here. And, there were still a lot of neighborhoods and communities that were split by the new district lines. There's a lot of uproar from constituents about the redistricting, not just the opposite party, but by, neighbors and communities that have been split now. In fact, it seems like we've decided, just to give away whole communities and neighborhoods to the Republican Party too, so that we can hold on, to our House districts and our Senate districts, which, is great for the Democrats, I guess, but it's not good for the people. And this is what the problem is that with all this partisan gerrymandering, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, it ends up that it's not a fair process for the voters. For Nevadans here, they want the right to elect their candidates that represent their communities. They don't want those candidates chosen for them. So, it's a huge problem here. And as far as the ongoing battle with the DNC, I expect that to be ongoing for a while, unfortunately.
Well, the reality is that the Republicans gerrymander to defeat the Democrats, and the Democrats gerrymander to defeat the progressives. And that we saw that against Bernie, and we continue to see it. So here's the $64 trillion question: how do we beat this? How do we stop the gerrymandering of our elections? And we did win in California. There is a pretty good, pretty transparent, nonpartisan commission that was voted in by the voters in California with $3 million from Arnold Schwarzenegger, for God's sakes. So how do we duplicate this? I know that North Carolina, you're in terrible shape. Ohio is in terrible shape. Many other states are, and then we had Alabama, where the Supreme Court of Alabama overturned a terrible gerrymandering situation, only to have the U.S. Supreme Court reinstate a terrible gerrymandering situation. How do we solve this problem? Anybody got an idea?
I do.
Yeah, I do.
All right, wait, we got hands actually. Ruth Strauss, and then Lynn Feinerman. Ruth, and then Lynn on gerrymandering, please.
What about me?
Well, you spoke earlier, Jeffrey. Let's do Lynn and Ruth, and we'll get you in quickly. Go ahead.
This isn't exactly, not exactly gerrymandering, but definitely voting. First, I wanted to thank Mr. Wilson for being on the call. As I recall, Ron Brown was, if I'm not mistaken, killed in a very suspicious plane crash. But anyway, it reminds me of, I think it's either W.E.B. Du Bois or Frederick Douglass, power concedes.
Ruth?
Yes, Sluggo, we're going to try to answer the question on gerrymandering and not get into Ron Brown this minute.
Go ahead.
Saying we need to enlarge the court. Thank you.
Okay, Lynn Feinerman, and then Jeffrey real quick.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, what is the possibility? I'm not familiar enough with constitutional election rules, but what is the possibility of having a national campaign to do redistricting in a decent and fair way?
Well, I think we could start one here. That's part of that's what we're hoping to do. We got to figure out how to do it. We have been talking about doing a major press conference or a major, I know Robert Wilson wants to do a major a Zoom or some kind of gathering or convention on gerrymandering, we don't have any easy answers here because it's a state by state situation largely. Jeffrey Barkdale, then I want to go back to, is Jennifer still with us? Jennifer Roberts? Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
I'm still here. I'm still here.
Jeffrey, go ahead, and then I want to ask Jennifer a question.
I found ways that we can stop gerrymandering via YouTube. I think they got some good info.
All right, very good. Well, I'll put it in the chat. We appreciate that. So Jennifer, we have the Carter Center, we have the Brennan Center, we have Eric Holder, who's working on this. We don't know how effectively. What can we do to pull together the big groups, follow through on Robert Wilson's suggestion that we have a national gathering on this? Something has to happen. We all know the problem now. We can't keep wringing our hands. I mean, the Ohio situation can only be described as psychedelic. I mean, how do you have in the year 2022, the state of Ohio in the middle of the United States of America that is so badly screwed up on their districting, they literally cannot have an election. They can't, these guys, even the good guys and the bad guys, whoever they are, they don't know at this point in time how to run for office. They don't know what districts they're in. It's insane.
Yeah, well,
so, Robert Wilson, do you think we can maybe convene a national convention? Jennifer, maybe the Carter Center can help facilitate something that we can deal with this?
Yeah, I do think that, obviously it's going to take federal legislation and, voting rights. Some of the voting legislation had stuff about gerrymandering in it. Of course, it didn't pass, but it's going to take federal legislation, kind of like civil rights law, because some states just aren't responsible. And it is a huge part of our democracy. Robert Wilson has had great experience in looking at how elections run and how gerrymandering runs. And, it's possible. I don't know if we can do it before 2022, but it would be great to do it before 2024, even though, some of the things may still be in court. But I think it is time for a national conversation. The challenge with gerrymandering is it's so wonky. The average person doesn't understand how you can have the same people and draw the line and end up with completely different results for who wins. They just don't. It's a very difficult concept to get popular support for, but we have enough nonprofits and enough smart people and lawyers, et cetera, who do know that we should be able to get something going. I don't know where you start. People like Eric Holder haven't figured it out or haven't been able to. It's the federal legislation needs to happen.
It's unreal. Well, okay, so let's plot a course here. We're going to talk about this every week till we get it done. Robert Wilson, go ahead. I want to call on Ray Mcclendon also, if he's still with us. Tell us about what's going on in Georgia. Robert, go ahead.
Okay, Harvey, there are a couple of things I think we can do, but each state's going to be different because the makeup and the severity of the problem in each state will vary from state to state. But what I think needs to happen is we do need to have a national conversation on gerrymandering. Plus, each state needs to do their independent redistricting commission in their state to draw the congressional and legislative maps, number one. Number two, I think we need a separate bill in Congress for pre-clearance that needs to be a standalone bill for pre-clearance for elections, so that before any of this is put into law, it would have to clear the Justice Department in terms of the constitutionality of it and the legitimacy of it. I also think we need to look at public financing for congressional and legislative races across the board. And last but not least, I think we need to now start making judges identify their party affiliation when they are running to be a judge.
Okay, that's fair. What I want to do now is we're gonna, at 6:15, we're going to have a discussion on 5G. So we've still got about 20 minutes. Julie Levine, thank you for being with us, and we're going to do that at 6:15 Eastern time, 3:15 California time. Until we get there, let's lay out some kind of tangible strategy that we'll discuss this every week now into the future. This has to be solved. There has to be a solution. Tatanka, you know the commission in California very well. It seems to work pretty well. What other states? I know that Michigan made some steps in that direction. What else can we do to get this going? And Judith, you're in Nevada. I don't know what your situation is with redistricting. Tatanka, can you talk about California?
Well, we have a two-thirds Democratic majority in California. It's a different situation in other states. So I don't have a solution for the things that Robert and everyone's bringing up. It is terrible. And those solutions, we do need a national conversation. We need national legislation, and we need grassroots organizing to get people involved in every community and in every state to embody citizen authority, to have this happen. I don't see any shortcut. I don't know.
I would disagree on that for a couple different reasons. Every time we try to have a discussion about voting rights or voter suppression, we get hung up with a filibuster or something. It's Democrats never seem to have the will to get it done. There's a lot of these things that could have been put into place already with a Democratic majority in Congress, and we've chosen not to do it. So this is going to come back to each state. There's no way to avoid that. In Nevada, we've had to push here for an independent commission, redistricting commission. And I think that's what we're going to have to continue to push on. Progressives particularly going to have to push Nevada towards that effort. And we can do it here by ballot initiative. So I think there's a lot of things that you have to look at as far as strategically to see what you can do in your state to push for an independent commission. Because I think that's the first step, is that there's got to be that the redistricting has to happen by an independent commission to start with. Here in Nevada, the lines are drawn by the state legislature. So whoever's in charge gets to make the decisions on where the maps are. For us, for Democrats, of course, it came out to our benefit this time because Democrats were in control, but it didn't come out to benefit the people of Nevada. And that's the problem with it. And that's why we have to continue to work to resolve that.
It's amazing. I mean, here we won this big victory in Ohio, and everybody thought, we had taken a step forward, and it's worse than ever. And it's like in Florida, where the progressives won this statewide initiative to allow ex-felons to vote, and the legislature waltzes in and puts in all these financial requirements. We have to have some kind of national strategy. And Jennifer Roberts, I hope we can work consistently with the Carter Center. I did want to call on Ray Mcclendon, who's a great strategist in Atlanta. Ray, what is your feeling on this? I know that Georgia is horrendously gerrymandered. Are you still with us, Robert?
Yeah, I'm here.
And then
I'm here.
I also want to call on Dennis Bernstein, if he's still with us, to announce something. But go ahead, Ray Mcclendon.
Yeah, I'm here, and we certainly need a national strategy, but we've got to be local. Let me tell you what's going on in Georgia right now. We have certainly the federal races and districts are going to be gerrymandered. But we go all the way down to the county commission and precinct level gerrymandering. So we're in battles right now over major counties, primarily Democratic counties in Georgia, where typically the maps that would be drawn would be approved by the local delegations. In Georgia, we have home rule, which means that the local delegation would take up bills affecting it not the entire House or Senate. They have gone now to taking those bills related to gerrymandering out of local legislation, where the Republicans have majority control, almost supermajority control, and are changing maps that typically, by precedent and tradition, would have been voted on solely by the local delegation. So what is the impact of that? That means that Fulton County, DeKalb County, Gwinnett, Chatham counties, which is Savannah, all of those counties and 2 or 3 others, Richmond County. What's the commonality in all of those? Those are Democratic strongholds. They are no longer now under local delegation control, but under state control. So that means even down to the county commission and the level races, this is a problem going forward. So we can talk about it from a congressional point of view, but we've got to have people that are concentrating on also what's going on community to community, county to county. We have something, as you all have heard, talking about with the Center for Common Ground, democracy centers. There's also another collaboration partner that we have here in Georgia called the Coalition for the People's Agenda, which was started by the late great Reverend Dr. Joseph E. Lowry, that started the People's Agenda. They have networks around the state now called democracy squads. So between democracy centers, democracy squads, the NAACP chapters in every county, we're now focused on these counties to galvanize the people to rise up, to deal with the issues of why this makes a difference, why it is that we should be allowing for the states to change tradition and precedents in order to take over local control of these operations. So this is a part of a bigger issue that we're dealing with here, but we have got to put a strategy together. Yes, it's great to go national and have a national strategy, but we've seen what that's gotten us. We have got to start grassroots organizing and go county to county, neighborhood to neighborhood, because that's what the Republicans are doing now. They're going neighborhood to neighborhood, and they are extracting concessions that allow them to put minority rule at multiple layers of government, and we can't overlook that. If we do, it's to our own peril.
Well, Steve Bannon has pretty clearly announced that that's what he intends to do, take over elections precinct by precinct. We're going to continue this next week, absolutely, and until we come up with something. We can't just say, oh, we need a national strategy, and then say the next week, we need a national strategy. So everybody needs to please think about this, read about this, get the links. I mean, Ray has that great book on the Georgia Miracle. Ray, if you can put it in the Georgia Way to the chat about how people can get that book, that would be great. I do want to quickly call on Dennis Bernstein. Dennis is one of our great radio presences on the Pacifica Network out of Berkeley. He's been very, very supportive on a lot of our calls. He's also a great poet and a great guy. Dennis, can you chime in here? You've got something going that you want to announce to everybody.
Yeah, well, first of all, I really appreciate coming to these election protection meetings every week. On our show, Flashpoints, we've been doing regular drumbeat reporting on every aspect of the stealing of the vote. And so I just want to encourage people. You can get me at Dennis at kpfa.org, Dennis at kpfa.org. If there's a story, if you yourself are engaged in a story, some example of, the theft, the steal, or the violence around it, we're doing as much reporting as we can, and we have the open door to tell that story because clearly this is going to get ugly. You all are talking about the practicalities and the structural things, but there's violence that's underlying all of this, and we want to keep an eye on that. as well. So if you've got a story, we're also now on daily in Los Angeles. We're all over the country now. We've got a good listenership all over the world. We want to get that story out. So it's Dennis@kpfa.org. If you've got a story, or if you think I should talk to somebody, or you know somebody who really has something to say and wants to get it out. Thank you, Harv.
Thank you, Dennis. Dennis is a great radio host. He's got a huge listenership now. He's what Pacifica should be. And so contact him, please. And Dennis, we're going to keep doing this. So next week, again, you got a homework assignment. We got to think on this. We got to figure this out. I don't have to explain to anybody on this call what the stakes are. And we've got the best organizers in the country. They don't come any better than Ray Mcclendon or Robert Wilson or Judith or so many others. So Jennifer Roberts at the Carter Center, if we can somehow bring in the Brennan Center, somehow connect with Eric Holder's efforts, we got to present some kind of document and some kind of game plan where we can overcome this. And you know, they did it in California, and we have a system in California that actually works well, and we've got to somehow duplicate it. I will point out that in 2008 and 2010, when the citizens movement was pushing to do this nonpartisan, transparent districting commission, the principal opposition came from the Democratic Party and Nancy Pelosi, because they were in charge, and you know, they had their safe districts and they wanted to keep them. So this is multi-partisan, and we need to deal with this as we will continue next week. MYLA Reson? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Harvey. Thank you, Harvey. You know, you asked me earlier if I had a Pacifica update, and I realize I do. If this would be a good time or later.
Well, let's finish with gerrymandering real quick.
Okay.
Well, actually, yeah, go ahead, please, because the election issues are alive and not well at Pacifica as well. And then I'll ask for more on gerrymandering. We will have 25 minutes or so on 5G, and then we will return at 40 past to the issues on gerrymandering, and then you can use the 4-letter words that we all love so well. But in the meantime, MYLA, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Harvey. You know, this is directly related to election integrity, and everyone who is concerned about election integrity should be concerned about this experiment in media democracy that has gone awry at Pacifica, because people, unfortunately, in charge of overseeing the democratic elections at Pacifica have overstepped and have created a very dangerous situation. At KPFK, at our local station board election that was held recently, 4 of our candidates were disappeared from the ballot after the ballots had been cast, after the listener members had voted, and the votes of over 100 listener members were not counted. They were thrown away. As a result of that, the local station board at KPFK is operating under a cloud of illegitimacy, because 4 individuals who would have won, unfortunately, one of those people, our dear friend Will Ryan, is no longer with us. He's passed away. But 3 of the 4 who were disappeared would now be serving on the KPFK local station board. All of the station boards at Pacifica are now electing delegate members from the local station boards to serve on the national board. And of those 3 who were illegitimately removed from the running would most likely be elected to serve on the committees of the Pacifica National Board. So the fact that this has major implications on the governance of Pacifica and KPFK, and it's still unsettled, and it's something that that you have written about, Harvey. and that people can find out more about if they go to newdaypacifica.org, and they can become informed. And hopefully, if you are a member, if you are a listener member of KPFK or Pacifica, we're hoping that you will weigh in on this and make sure to right this wrong, because this is still a struggle that we're involved in and it's not settled yet. And thank you,
Right.
Harvey.
Thank you, Myla. And I will say that Myla and I, this has never happened to me in my whole career as an activist. Myla and I were censored in the last KPFK board meeting. The chair of the board refused to allow us to speak to this very issue. And Pacifica is very, very important. I know it's an eye roller when we bring it up here, but Myla did a very good job there, and we need your participation, and it allows us.
Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed when the sun shone